Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome to another acrylic painting tutorial. On today's tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous sunset landscape. I'm going to teach you how to create and blend realistic tones to create an underpainting where you can layer the clouds and detail on top, and we're going to create heat and light. I'm going to teach you how to create realistic waves and three-dimensional sea foam so you can create this realistic sunset beach landscape in acrylic paints. So let's get into it. Now the colours we're going to use today are white, yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, a tiny bit of brown and some black. All colours can be made from these core colours. Now I have a medium canvas that I've painted burnt sienna, and I've got 1/3 as the sky, I've got the horizon, I've got a big wave in the middle here, and then at the bottom I'm going to have a bit of sea foam, and I'm going to have some wet sand, and then lastly some sand. So if anyone would like to pause the outline, pause the video, you can copy down the outline and away we go. Now just to start, we're going to create some heat and we're going to get darker into our corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really bright yellow. So I'm going to mix some yellow, white and a dot of black to create this Naples yellow. Now I have it all pre-mixed, but all it is yellow, lots and lots of white and a dot of black just to take a little bit of the colour out, and we get this lovely Naples yellow. And all this is going to be the heat around our sun. So just like always with acrylics, don't worry if they are a bit streaky. What I'm doing is just adding a tiny dot of black and some more yellow, a tiny bit of purple and white to the mix. So I'm basically just getting dark as I get towards the corners. But as I say, don't worry if your painting is a bit streaky. This is the underpainting, and what we're trying to do is we're going to try and cover up as much of that burnt sienna. So we're going to create a lavender colour, which is purple, lots and lots and lots and lots of white, and a dot of black again, just to create this lovely sort of lavender colour. And all that is just between the yellow, and we're going to add some blues. It's just so you don't get a green sky. So we just use this little bridge tone before we get onto our blues. So to make the light blue, all we're going to use is cobalt blue, tons and tons of white, and again a dot of black, and you should get this really light pastel blue. And just by adding a little bit of blue, bit more, and a dot of purple to your mix, you should get this darker shade of the same blue. So all we're trying to do is we're trying to darken up our corners, and we're trying to create the illusion that it's brighter around the sun and the horizon, and it gets cooler in tone as it goes up in the sky to the corners. So if you just imagine, we're just getting darker as we go up. So we're going to get some purple, some blue, a little bit of crimson, which is just red, blue and a dot of black, and a little bit of red. So we just want to make a purpley red colour, and I'm just going to add a little bit of orange to that mix, and all I'm going to do is just create a warm purple. So all I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to create the underpainting that we're going to paint on top of. So by blocking it in just with a big brush, as I say, acrylics are very streaky because they're water based. If you have to do 2 coats, there's nothing wrong with that, but all they are is they're very streaky, they're very scruffy. So as I say, all we're doing with our big brush is blocking them in. So if your painting is looking a bit scruffy and rough, don't worry, it's to be expected. We just want to leather on the colours, and we just want to cover up our burnt sienna. So all I'm doing, we're getting a bit cooler because we're getting further away from the sun, and we're getting towards the beach. So by just adding some blue and white to the mix, I'm just making that tone a little bit cooler. So all I've done is just added some cobalt blue and white just to that orangey purple, and I'm just blending the tones together, just creating X's with my big brush. As I say, we're just creating the underpainting, okay? So I'm going to take some orange, I'm just going to mix it into that tone and some of that crimson tone and a dot of black and blue just to darken it up. And I'm just going to do the same. Now, I was going to do a light colours beach, but I think it's just too light in tone, so I've added some brown and some blue to the mix. So still got plenty of orange in it, but I've just added some brown, a little bit of brown and a little bit of blue, and I'm just with the big brush just blending all the tones together. And what that should do, just like the painting tutorial we did the other day, I'm just getting some cobalt blue just to put in where my waves are, just so I don't forget. Yeah, just like we did with the ocean scene the other day where we did the seawater, we're just creating an underpainting that we can do all the detail on top. So we're going to do that with the sky first. So we always start at the back and work our way towards the viewer. So by just taking the exact same tones as we did before, which was yellow, lots and lots and lots and lots of white, and a dab of black to create a Naples yellow, and I'm just adding a tiny bit more yellow and black at the corners just to darken them up, just so the middle where our sun is going to be is the brightest in tone. And then we've got that lavender tone, which was just purple, lots and lots and lots of white, and a dab of black. And all I've done is just mixed it in with that previous Naples yellow just to create a bridge tone. Just got a little chip there, just correct that and paint over it. And we're just adding more purple to that mix as we go up. Still incredibly more white than anything. And we're going to do the same with the light blue tone. So remember, it was cobalt blue, lots and lots of white, and a dot of black to create that lovely pastel blue. And just by adding a little bit more blue and a dot of purple just to cool it, I'm just making it look much more blended. So just as I say, with acrylics, by just doing a second coat over the top, not only does it make all your canvas, if you've painted it burnt here like myself, which you don't have to by the way, it just makes sure you've covered everywhere on your canvas, you haven't got any bits shining through, but also it just makes your blending look a lot more nicer. So we're going to take a flat brush and we're going to get some purple and orange to create this lovely tone, and we're going to add a little bit of red and crimson to it. So basically just warming it up, so just basically orange, purple and a little bit of red just to make it more crimsony than anything. And we just, with my flat brush, we're just going to create the illusion of clouds. Now again, we're just doing the underpainting, we're just blocking in, so we're doing the shadow tones of our clouds. So we're doing the darker tones and then we'll put our highlights over the top. So if you imagine around the sun, it's going to be incredibly hot, so the tones are going to be warmer, and as they go off into our corners, they're going to be darker. So all I'm doing is, while I've got that colour, I'm just using that for the sort of lighter in tone shadow colour, and we'll darken up areas around our corners like usual. So to darken it up, what I'm going to do is take some crimson and blue, so some red and purple and blue, and a little bit of black just to darken it up, and we're just going to do a darker tone in those corners. So if you just imagine, they're the shadows of clouds that aren't as getting as much sunlight, so they're just darker in tone. So if you just imagine our little dot, our little sun is incredibly luminous, incredibly bright, so all these shadows, they are going to be darker in tone because they're going to be cooler in tone. So if we take some yellow and orange again, and we just add a dot of red just to warm it up, we create a warmer tone. So not yellow and orange, purple and orange, my mistake, sorry. So purple and orange creates this lovely sort of tanny brown tone, but if you just add more orange than you do in purple, and by just adding a teeny tiny bit of red, which is what I've just done now, you can create this sort of almost like flame colour. So while I've got that tone, I'm just going to create the sort of wispy clouds that go along the horizon. So it's a bit bright, but as I say, we're going to soften everything up, and we're going to make everything look much more nicer towards the end. We're just going to block everything in for the time being. So by just using that light tone, what we're trying to do is create the illusion of heat around the sun. So all this middle area is going to be getting the most heat, so they're warmer in tones, and we're going to have some of these little sort of floaty clouds, little tiny clouds. So all we're doing while we've got that hot tone, we're just going to just soften areas and just blend it. So I'm going to swap brush, and I'm going to just put my sun back in. So I'm just using bright white just to put my sun in, and I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm going to create some orange, some red, and lots of yellow to create a really bright peachy tone, and a dot of black just to suck a bit of the colour out. And just round the sun, I'm just going to have some really, really bright highlights on my cloud. So if you imagine that cloud is getting all that heat and all that sun, so the bottom of it is going to be extremely bright. So all I'm doing is just using a really, really warm tone, so orange and yellows and a dot of red, and just underneath it, just to really emphasize that heat. So really easy trick. So all we're doing, we're using tones to trick the eyes. We're just using tones to create the illusion of heat, to try to mirror nature. So really easy. So we're just putting, if you imagine the sun is shining upwards to the base of those clouds. So we're going to take some of the crimson, which is just purple and red, and a little bit of blue, and we're just going to add some purple to the mix and a dot of black, and we're just going to make a darker tone. And we're just going to create the opposite. So where we've got some heat, we're going to create some cooler tones, and we're just going to create little tiny bits coming off it, just little shapes and sizes, just so our clouds look a bit more realistic. So I'm just creating edges and I'm just creating shadows. So these are just clouds that are just floating past. The great thing with clouds, you can't go wrong. You can just do all different types of shapes and stuff. And all I'm doing is just creating a darker ridge, because obviously that ridge isn't getting as much sunlight or heat. So that's all you got to think of, is just think what side would be getting the heat and the sunlight, and which side would be darker and cooler in tone, which would be the shadow. Really easy trick. So just practice with your clouds. It's not hard, but as I said many times with acrylics, especially with highlights, so as I just go over my white sun again, sometimes you just have to go over lighter tones, because with acrylics, as they're water based, it picks up the tone from underneath. And because we've done an underpainting, when you're adding highlights, unlike oils, the paint is very thin. So what we're doing, I'm just using some white and a little bit of yellow in it, just to give it a really bright tone around my sun. Sometimes you just have to reapply twice your highlights. So things like a sun that is bright white, sometimes you just got to let it dry and just go over it again, just to emphasize things like your highlights. So I'm just using some bright white and yellow, and I'm just going to add more yellow to the mix. So what I'm trying to do is just make the sky a bit more yellow around the area. I'm just poking holes, and they could be sort of yellowy clouds, but I'm just leaving the middle bit extremely luminous, so white and yellow, just to really emphasize that bright sun. So our sunset is starting to look really pretty, so I'm just going to add some yellow now. I'm just going to darken up areas with some bright yellow, and it's just to emphasize that sun in the middle. And I'm going to mix some white and a dot of yellow, so predominantly white, and I'm just going to highlight my clouds. So all I'm doing, I'm just swapped to a thinner brush, and all I'm doing is I'm just outlining the clouds. That's all I'm doing. But just like the shadows, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to emphasize areas that are catching the sunlight. So these are all the areas that are having a really harsh highlight, because the sun is so strong, and it creates a really bright highlight. So it's just white, a little bit of yellow, just to create a really striking highlight on our clouds. So again, think of our sunset. This is all the areas that the bright luminous sun is just catching these clouds, and it just gives it a more 3D look. So it's really easy. It's just highlighting, just outlining, and just like that sun, as I say, sometimes you just have to do two coats, because we've done our sky, obviously that lavender and that light blue. If you're adding yellow and white, it's going to absorb some of that colour. So if I just zoom out a bit, so you might have to do two coats, which is nothing wrong, just take your time. So all I'm doing is just punching some holes with some yellow, and I'm just getting that same colour, which was white and yellow, and I'm just outlining our cloud. But our sunset is starting to look fantastic. And as I say, it's all in the tones. There's hardly any detail. It's all in these tones that are tricking your eye. And I'm just going to add some yellow and orange just to the clouds underneath, because they are going to be the warmest in tone, because they are nearest to the sun. And by making them more yellow and orange, and just a little bit more orange here, Not only does it make it look like they're highlighted, but it just pushes them back a little bit as well, just to make it look like our sun is on the horizon. And I've got that yellow and orange highlight. I'm just going to create some more little clouds. I'm just going to soften up this area. So all I'm using is a little blender brush, and I'm just softening up this area with just some yellow and orange. And as I say, just if you think of it just like our clouds in the sky, they get darker in tone as they go to the left and the right away from the sun. So even if we're doing yellow and orange, we want to get darker as they move away from the sun. So what I'm doing is just softening up the ones with my blender brush that are nearest the sun, just to make them look less harsh on the eye, not only in tone but in texture, just by using the blender brush just to soften them. And then just add a little bit of crimson. It's a bit too much, I think that's a bit too dark, but don't worry, we'll blend it together. We're just going to blend the tone. As I say, we want to get darker as we get further away from the sun to create that illusion of heat. So I'm just going to add a little bit of purple and orange to the crimson. There we go, just darken it up just in those corners. Do the exact same trick. So look, there we go. So we've got this fantastic sunset now. So please dry your work, and then we're going to use painting tape to create a straight horizon. So if you've got a nice dry sunset, we're going to do the water. So what we're going to do, we're going to get our flat brush again, and we're going to get bright orange. And because we've got this really dark tone shining through, what we're going to do is just create lines. So all I'm doing is creating perfectly straight lines, just little angles in them, and I'm just leaving gaps. And I'm just, if I zoom in, I'm just leaving gaps in the underpainting in that dark purple. And what we're trying to do is create the illusion of waves. So these are all the highlighted. If you imagine all the dark tone is the shadow of the wave, and all this orange, if we create a nice outline for our big wave, why not, is going to be the highlights that are all picking up the sunlight, and we get that lovely sort of shimmer on the ocean water. So whereas it comes towards the beach, our ocean sea is getting all the light from the sun. So what I'm going to do is get some yellow, and just while I've got some yellow, I'm just going to create a shimmer coming down, just so I know where the sun is. So I'm going to get some purple, blue and black, and I'm going to create a really dark shadow tone, and we're going to block in our wave. So where we have a wave, we're going to create a really dark tone, because this wave, if you imagine, it's got its back to the sun, and all this area is in the shade because it's got its back to the sun. So if you imagine, the wave is coming towards the viewer. So all we're going to do is just add a little bit more black, and with my flat brush we're going to create the illusion of texture and waves as it comes towards the shore. So if you imagine all the water as it comes towards the shore, it all sort of bunches together and it creates that sort of carpet, and you get all the foam. So all I'm doing is creating little divots, but I'm leaving the underpainting, and by leaving the underpainting colour to shine through, it tricks your eye. So what we're trying to do is create a 3D effect. So we're going to have some more waves, just leaving gaps, just creating straight lines and just sort of wiggles, and we're just creating the illusion of some waves. So there we go, just by adding a little bit more black to mix, just a really dark shadow tone. Now we're just going to add some more black and blue, and we're just going to outline it, so we've got this clear definition where we want everything to be, so we know where our sea runs out, and then the line underneath it's going to be our wet sand where the sea retracts back, and you get that sort of nice bit of wet sand. So we're going to mix some yellow and orange together, and all I'm going to do is just create a shimmer coming down. So just yellow and orange. I'm going right up to the tape, and I'm just creating the highlights now. Now that bit's a bit drier, I'm just creating the highlighted wave, just like we did with the orange previously. We're doing the exact same trick, so we're just creating lines and leaving gaps in the underpainting. And these areas, if you imagine, these highlights are going to be brighter because they're nearer to that really extreme bright light from the sun. So that's why they're so bright yellow. So just by mixing yellow and orange, we've got just much more extreme highlights because obviously they're much more near extreme light. Now as we get further away and towards the beach, our sunset highlights, we're going to add more orange. So we're doing the exact same trick. So look, just the exact same trick. We're leaving gaps in the underpainting to create the illusion of texture, to create the illusion of wave. So it's just super easy. So as I say, this tutorial is a bit more advanced because you've all been crying out to it and you've all been doing so well with my previous tutorials. So all I'm doing here, I'm just creating zigzags with that same color just to create the illusion of highlights. So where we've done the shadows now, with the dark black tone, we're going to just create some zigzags just to create some highlights of the sunlight hitting and creating ripples in the water surface, just again to make it look more 3D. So as I say, thank you so much everyone who's liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I am super proud of everyone doing my tutorials. Some of the people's versions that they're sending me on Instagram are just fantastic. So well done everyone. So I thought while everyone is doing so well, we're going to make the tutorials a little bit harder. So this one's a bit more for intermediate people. But hopefully you're grasping all the ideas and all the techniques with these acrylic tutorials, and now you're applying them to your own artwork by recreating the tutorials and hopefully learning all these tips and skills to create for your own artwork. So all I'm doing, I'm just using that same orangey colour. As I say, we've just added some highlights. I've just added a little bit of yellow on some just to make it look like the sun is catching those nearest waves. And all I've done is I've turned my flat brush completely downwards, and all I'm doing is just scraping it down with some orange and yellow. Now where you have the water retract back into the sea, you get this lovely shiny wet sand. Now the wet sand normally mirrors the sky. So if you just imagine whatever colour your sky is, if your sky was purple, this wet sand will be the same colour. And it's this lovely shimmering wet sand. So by just turning my brush back to being sideways, all I'm doing is just creating the look of the wet sand. And I'm just going to get some yellow, barely any paint on my brush, almost dry, and I'm just going to come down and just try to mirror the sky and mirror that sunlight on it. And I'm going to remove my tape. Now unfortunately my tape got stuck and it kept falling apart as I was removing it, so I took a bit of the paint off there, but we can fix that later, so don't worry. So we're going to take some of the darker blue, which was purple, cobalt blue, lots and lots of white and a dab of black, and we're just going to get a smaller brush and we're going to turn it sideways and we're going to push quite hard onto the canvas just so it sort of scrapes and it's all sort of fluffy in the paint. And we're going to create the illusion of the lovely sea foam. So on our wave, we're going to create the illusion of sea foam. So by using this darker, cooler tone, which matches the far corners of our sky, we can just mirror the sort of colours and texture in our sea foam. So all I'm doing, I'm going to create zigzags now. So I've got this thin brush, and all I'm doing, I'm just trying to create diagonal sort of lines. And some of them are going to join up to that big border, and all we're trying to do is create the sort of carpet of seawater that comes towards our beach. So now we've got this gorgeous sunset, we want to make it look more 3D, we want to create a lovely composition that the viewer can get lost into. So what we're trying to do is, where we've got our sun in the center of our sunset, and now we've got our beach and we've got our wave coming towards the viewer, we're trying to create so much realism that the viewer really gets lost in the composition. So we're just creating these shapes, so with this dark purpley blue, and what it's doing, it's just tricking your eyes. Where we've done all the hard work and we've done all the preparation, now adding these highlights over the top, it should look like sort of veins in the sea foam of our ocean water. So just like we did the other day with our ocean and wave tutorial, where we had the sort of daytime similar composition with the waves, we're now doing it with a sunset. So it's the same trick. So that looks fantastic. So while we've got that colour, I'm going to show you how to create a wave. So we're going to leave lots of the dark undertone the shadow tone, and I'm going to create froth, and we're going to create the illusion of a wave smashing against the shore. So all I'm going to do is just create the sort of foam as the wave hits that carpet, sort of that wash, and it splatters, and you get all this lovely great foam. And while I've got that colour, I'm just going to tip my flat brush sideways, and I'm just going to create a few ripples in the water just so it looks like the light shimmering with that same colour. So all I'm going to do is take the lighter of the blue, so just add some white to your mix, and I'm just going to add some highlights on these waves here, just to make them look more 3D. And it's just where the sunlight is just catching some of the wash and just giving a little sparkle on the froth, so on that sea froth. So I'm going to do that right on the ridge here, and again it's just to create the illusion of sunlight hitting some of those sort of sea foam, so these sort of little zigzags, so just some on the top here, and it's just where that light is coming round on that wave, and it just creates a more 3D look. So I'm just going to join up some of these zigzags with that lighter tone. So I'm just adding a little bit more white to the mix, and I'm just going to create some highlights just so it looks like the sun. And while I've got that, and I've got this tiny brush, I'm just going to create some dross, so just sort of like some water, just sort of like an edge on our wet sand, and just some bubbles, just again to give it a more defined look, to make more realism. And I'm just going to take some yellow and white, and I'm just going to come down. Now I made a bit of a mistake here. I did it a bit too bright, so if you don't copy me just for this bit, because I'm going to smooth it out with a wipe. I think it just looked a bit too bright, it just looked a bit too harsh, so I wiped it out and I just left it just sort of blurred. There we go. It's a great thing about acrylics, you can just wipe off a mistake. And I'm just going to neaten it up with the tones we had previously. Just go back over them. Now we're going to just outline everything. So we're going to create a shadow tone. So we're going to mix some black and blue. And we're just going to really create a really thick outline for our carpet of water. So our ocean, as it hits the beach, it's going to have a nice shadow. And while we've got that dark tone, we're just going to create some divots in our sand. So again, just to give it a more 3D look, we're just going to add some texture to our sand, just so it looks like people have walked across our sand and you've got sort of footprints and impressions on the sand. So as I said many times, you can always go more detailed. So I've just mixed some black and blue, and I'm just going to outline our wave froth, just again to emphasize it, and just the top of the wave, just to make it look more striking, just to make it look more 3D. So just by using a darker tone, we're just creating a shadow underneath all that wave as it thumps against the ocean water. And I'm just going over some of the waves that we created. Now we've put those highlights on, and I'm just going to get some tape. So we're just going to finish everything up for the next 5-10 minutes. So just by outlining our wave and just darkening up our corners and just doing some little tricks, we're just going to finish up the piece. So I'm going to get some crimson, which is just red, blue and a little bit of black. I'm going to add a little bit more black to the mix. So we've got this really dark, warm purpley grey, and I'm going to go right up to the tape, and I'm just going to create some lines and some waves and just try to frame the composition by using a darker tone. So what I'm doing is using a darker tone on the edges, just so again the lighter tones in the middle stand out, and also because we've got our wave in the middle and we've got our sun, it draws the viewer to the middle. So there we go, we've got a clear definition now of our horizon with our sea. So just going to neaten everything up, just going to get some black. I'm just going to really emphasize our wave and our water coming up now onto the beach, just so everything looks really cool. So we get some orange and crimson, and I'm just going to put a little bit of highlight in the middle of the wave where the sunlight is just peeking through the middle of the wave. So all these little bits of realism, just add a little bit of blue and black just to darken it up, just around it. So as I say, you can go photorealistic, you can have a reference photo, but obviously a lot of these things I'm teaching you, I'm taking little ideas from places I've been on holiday and my own artwork, and I'm just sort of winging it and coming up with little scenarios from my imagination. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting some yellow and white, and as I say, I'm just emphasizing the highlights like I was saying to you earlier. So I'm just doing a second coat, so I'm just taking my time and just going over the highlights that we did earlier just to make them brighter. And I'm just coming down from that sun with some yellow and white. I'm just going to create the sort of shimmer on the water where you have the sunlight, just using some yellow and white, just coming up to those waves up to our shore of our beach. So it's looking fantastic. So just by using such things as a blender brush, you can just soften areas where you think things are too harsh or you've missed bits. You can just go over areas. All I'm doing here is just, obviously it's a bit hard to see, but if there's any gaps in the canvas, the burnt sienna will show up, or if there's any streaks. And as I say, I'm just trying to soften areas, just make areas look a bit more realistic, just using tones that I think are realistic. So things like the white, so just using jet white just to put a really little highlight and just go around some of my clouds just so they pop, just so they look really more realistic and 3D. So as a landscape, as I say, it's trying to create compositions that the viewer gets lost into. So all I'm going to do now, I'm just going to get some black, some red and some purple, but more black than anything, and I'm just going to create a really dark shadow tone of all the sort of little tiny floater clouds and the back end of these clouds that are hardly getting any sunlight, and just creating a really harsh shadow. So all just where we've done the highlight on one side, I'm just using that to create some little tiny floater clouds, just to add some more detail to the mix, and just to really emphasize these clouds and just darken up my corners. And while I've got that color, because it's so dark, I'm just going to re-emphasize my wave just so it stands out more, just looks more three-dimensional. So that's looking fabulous. It's looking so good. And while we've got a really dark tone, I've saved my darkest blacks to the very end, because I'm going to create just some texture, and I'm going to darken up my corners to again draw the viewer's eyes into the middle of the composition, so everyone will stare at our ocean beach, our gorgeous sunset. And I'm going to use jet white and a tiny bit of yellow just to create some of the froth and little bubbles on the wet sand, just to add some texture, just so it looks like the water is peeled back. You get all those sort of dross and bubbles. So again, it's just to add a little layer of realism. Just go around the highlights one more time, just some white and yellow, just so they stand out, and it creates a really nice edge for those clouds. But as a ocean landscape, a sunset ocean view, you've learned how to do waves and everything. I'm thinking it's looking fantastic for something we've done in just over half an hour. This whole painting, I sped the footage up a tiny bit just so it's easy to follow along. From start to finish, it took me about an hour. So hopefully, as I said to you, these tutorials are really practical. What I'm doing there, I'm just softening it up with some yellow and orange just to make that heat. So I've got my signature in the bottom left hand corner, and we've got this lovely heat. So we've got lighter tones around the sun, and it gets darker as it goes towards the cooler corners. We've got this lovely three-dimensional wave. You've got this ocean carpet. You've learned how to do sea froth and wet sand. You've got this beautiful shimmer and texture in your beach. So you've learned how to create this gorgeous sunset ocean beach acrylic painting tutorial. So thank you all for watching, guys. Thank you so much for subscribing. We have lots of tutorials now, so they should be coming up on the screen or on the right hand side on the suggested videos. Please like and subscribe. I'm Murray, and take care of yourself, guys. See you soon. Bye.